King Charles is on his first trip to Australia since being crowned in 2023. The British monarch remains Australia's head of state 25 years after a referendum on constitutional change was defeated. Indigenous Senator Lydia Thorpe interrupted a royal reception at Parliament House in Canberra on Monday, calling for a treaty between the Australian government and First Nations people. Let's bring now Esther Anatolitis, who's a co-chair of the Australian Republican Movement. Esther, great to have you with us. And let me begin by asking, with this visit, what have you seen in terms of public sentiment, the interest in going again for this Republic debate?
Well, we're seeing growing interest in the future Australian Republic and support for the future Australian Republic, which is not surprising when we have a visit by their sitting head of state only once every 10 or more years. It's been 11 years in this instance. It's a really important reminder for people that, yes, in this day and age, Australia's head of state is still a monarch from another country and not someone who is democratically selected by Australians. In fact, it's been the most frequent question in the global media interviews that my co-chair Nathan Hansford and I have been doing, which is that question of, oh gosh, I hadn't realised that really in 2024 your head of state is in another country. We're of course in the minority of Commonwealth nations who aren't a republic yet, so it's I think at best a cause for sort of confusion and bemusement and of course an important moment to keep thinking about and working towards the future Australian Republic.
I think that, it's interesting you talk about if it's mere sort of bemusement and a little bit of a throwback and a passing thought, if you will, what can kind of drive momentum for turning this into an actual issue that Australians will care about and will be decisive about, I guess, if there is still an enduring sort of background affection for the monarchy in Australia?
I think it's really about who we are as Australians today. So Australia is a richly diverse country. More than half of us now either were born overseas or have one parent who was born overseas. That includes me. I'm from a migrant family and English is not my first language. When we look at that history, as you say, Australia no longer has a privileged relationship with any one country around the world. And so what may have made sense in the past at the time of federation very much no longer makes sense for Australia. Our campaign, which has been a popular culture campaign called Monarchy, the Farewell Oz Tour, has been all about really drawing out who we are as Australians. We value fairness, we value equity, we value a fair go. But when we have these rare royal visits, they are, a bit of a touring show that that democracy, goes on a bit of a pause for as we focus on our visiting head of state, instead of having visiting dignitaries greeted by an Australian head of state who works for us full time, who is accountable only to us.
Esther, certainly the symbolism around this is very well understood, and it is a bit weird having a head of state that's on the other side of the planet and is a monarch as well. But Australians also have a love of pragmatism. This is cheap and it works just fine. Why change it?
I think Australians increasingly expect a head of state who is focused just on us full time, who is able to, in Australia and around the world, be a great unifying symbol, but who is also very rigorously focused and foresightful for Australia's interests, be they trade, cultural, or all those other interests domestically and internationally. A part-time head of state can't achieve that. Their focus is on numerous countries countries as well as their own kingdom. And of course it goes to the democratic focus, the democratic purpose. It doesn't make sense to have at the apex of Australian democracy a person who is not democratically selected by Australians, isn't an Australian citizen, and whose powers remain ill-defined in the Constitution, which of course doesn't mention our own Prime Minister. So there's a lot to work on there, legally, constitutionally, but also culturally and in terms of the ethics and the equity of democracy.
Well, as Heidi mentioned, there was a referendum on this 25 years ago, and it did famously fail, and Australia ended up keeping the monarchy. But part of the problem there was the debate around what replaces it and the idea of electing a president or a head of state, and things became horribly politically embroiled. How do you answer this question going forward?
Well, of course, we are very much a different country to a generation ago. We're far more diverse than we were. And so that notion of that lack of a privileged relationship with another country, it's even more prominent now. The Australian Republic movement has developed a model called the Australian Choice Model, which was developed as a result of really extensive national consultation and input from constitutional scholars, which provides a balance between some of the great and practical models around the world, as well as being an evolution on our current model. And that's on our website, but really as a discussion starter, because the next step is really, of course, to continue our conversation so that that momentum does grow. And we know from Australian Republic movement research that 92% of Australians are open to the idea of the future Australian Republic, and 75% of currently serving federal MPs are also supportive. And so it's simply about maintaining those great conversations until we find the best moment for everyone.
Is that moment sooner rather than later? Because in a longer term, is it going to be difficult to maintain that momentum and to have that conviction? Because we know that the Prince and Princess of Wales are extremely popular.
Yes, and I'm heartened by that and the popularity of all the royals. But of course, Australian democracy isn't a show. We look at the people that we appoint on their merits, and we expect to elect our future head of state on that basis. It's the time, of course, will need to be right for everyone, and that's a conversation that does keep going. We've had, I think it was just a couple of years ago, when Prince William was in the Caribbean and was saying to nations, becoming republics, that of course relationships evolve, but friendships endure, and it's a very simple and heartfelt and heartening approach of that evolution of the relationship and the friendship that awaits Australia.